Yeah, so the agenda for tonight, I was thinking where we ended up with the project last time was we had built an events list for the events on KWJS, and we had done some very, very basic styling. What I'd like to do is clean up a little bit of the styling for that tonight, which shouldn't take very long. And then we want to create an event screen so that, like event details, so we can load up the description for the event. We're going to do an update to our service so that we can hit one of the new endpoints that I added on the back end that was created for this thing. And then the last step is actually bringing in navigation so that you know how to run multiple screens on the app and navigate between them, because I think that's kind of a logical question for what you'd want to do within an app. With that, I will dig right into it. Okay, so this is roughly what we had last time. We had a window title up here for events. I removed that just after the meetup because we're going to go to navigation. We're going to use the standard window titles anyway. Like I said, we've just got an events listing. We got some very basic styling. I want to do a little bit of cleanup on that styling, and obviously we've got some text width issues here that are fairly easy to fix. So let's dig into that first. What we want to do is just make sure that we don't have any extra width in here. So what I'm going to do is switch into the events screen, and then I also want to go into the events component. So this is what we were dealing with before. We have a details section which had the name and the attendees, which lines up with this part. And then we have the date on the left-hand side. And one of the issues that we're dealing with here is we have this this width is not constrained, and I think the padding is actually adding to it. So what I want to do here is I'm going to pull out this border. I think I'm going to pull that out too. And then we're going to give this just a width of 70%. And I'm also going to give this a date text. So the styles are not, there's not too much to them. It basically works the same way as regular CSS for anyone who wasn't part of it before, except you're looking at camel casing rather than kebab casing on things. I've been suffixing everything with text so we know we're applying font styles rather than actual container styles. Let's go in here. We're going to give it a style. That's just going to be a styles.date. And we'll just give this an explicit width too. Yeah, so that did clean up what we were dealing with before. There's still a couple padding issues I think that we want to get rid of. So this date padding can disappear. Yeah, so this is all I'm thinking about this for this list right now. Nothing too much. Yeah, that's it for our styling. So I'm going to make a commit here. Okay, we're going to bring in an event here. The general look is going to be this list. It's going to have a title at the top here for events. And then when we click into this, we're going to go to an events details screen, which will show this information, but then it will have a large text field at the bottom for showing the event details underneath. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is create an event screen. And that one's going to be a hard-coded thing. So in terms of context on this, if we look at the services file that we created last time, if you weren't here last time, don't worry too much. But we're basically dealing with an API, which is a Nest.js API. We hit that, and then we get a list of events objects back. And those events objects have an ID, a name, date strings, an attendees count, and a description. And we do the date transformation somewhere else in here, but this is generally what we're looking at. So what we want to do for the screen here is we're going to just swap out the home page until we get the navigation in place to show the event details. And I'm going to hard code in, I think, what that event is going to look like. So let's dive right into that. And the way we're going to do that is we've got a screens directory. We're just going to do a new event screen, and that's going to look like this. Okay, we're going to do a spec file for it, and then we're going to do a container at the end. So now the screen, what we want to run is, this is going to be a describe block. So one of the things we're using here for testing, and it was in the description for it, is we're running the test through Jest. and we're using React Native Testing Library for actually doing the testing. And React Native Testing Library is something that we use every day on like work projects, and it's nice because it actually it doesn't fake out as much of React as some things do. Like it will do a full render of the view hierarchy when you're actually trying to test through things, and the interface to it works the same way as you would when you're trying to access things like as a user. So you're actually grabbing text by elements or using accessibility IDs or those kind of things. But in terms of Jest, what we're doing here is this is just going to be a test against the screen. We're going to do TDD for a lot of this. We're not for other parts, but I'm going to do a screen test here. We will do just a renders for now. Keep this simple. And then what we're looking for is I think it's going to be a get by text that we need to do. And get by text is something that's provided by the React Native testing library. So when we do render out the screen, we're going to want to make sure that we see the name, we want to see the attendees count and all those kind of things with it. So what we do here is there's a render. This is coming from testing library. And then what you do is pass in the JSX for this. So we'll do a screen, we'll send it an event. Okay, and let's define this event for now. The thing we did here is we brought in this fixtures folder from last time. And this fixtures folder does give us everything that we need for the event. The event itself isn't a class, it's just an interface coming from TypeScript to make sure that we know what everything or what the fields are going to be. So what I'm going to do here is we'll do a const fixture. And we're going to require from that fixtures folder. So that's going to give us our event that we can use for testing. And then events.json. And then our event is just going to be a fixture 0 should give us what we need. So this is going to be complaining because we haven't actually created our screen component yet. So let's swing out and do that next. I'm going to do an import React. I'm going to do a screen component. And we'll give this a type in a second. So this interface is going to be screen props. And then our event is what we want to take in. This event, we're overriding kind of a default JavaScript thing, but I couldn't think of a better name, so I'm going to keep this. Services, events, and events. So this is telling us what type that prop is going to be. And the way you'd specify this in TypeScript is you do a react.fc, pass in the screen props as a variable here for the type. Then you do a props. Alrighty. Now our return out of this is going to be just a view, I think. And we'll do props.events.name. This will give us something that we can actually hook into. I don't have this in the test yet, but we might as well get it started. Okay, so the interface, again, through Jest here is going to be an expect. And then the get by text is coming from React Native Testing Library. It's going to be an event.name. And we just expect this to be defined. The to be defined isn't actually necessary because it's React Native Testing Library is going to throw an error if it can't find that element again. But just doing it for readability for now. And then our screen itself, we're going to do an export default. Okay, so now if we run this test, we should see a pass, I think. Okay, good. So let's TDD the rest of this out. And I'm thinking we can do a, let's do attendees next. Okay. We're going to expect this to be defined, and this should complain at us saying that it's not there. It does. So what I'm going to do is switch back into this. I know I just copied this from the test, but that's what we're going to do for now. So this is the attendees count, and then we will do attendees here, and we're going to rerun the test. Okay, there we go. The next thing that I'm thinking we can do is presentation-wise, I'm thinking we can have the date, and then we'll have the time range underneath it. So it's just going to be like a from-to, but the date itself is just going to be a simple date, probably a long date string. Let's do a date. So we're going to bring in moment just for the date formatting utilities that are in here. And I think we're going to do a format. I think this is what we're looking for. And then for these format strings, we're going to do a yeah, okay. That works. So we're going to expect that the date shows up here too. And then we're going to do one more check here that start, do, end. So then if you just look at the test itself, we're looking at this control of having an event name. It'll have a date. It'll have a start and end time. It'll have an attendees count. And then I'm just going to add the last one too. And that's going to be an event description right off the bat. So if we run this, we should get a whole bunch of failures because we don't have the content in place for it. We'll actually just stop at the first one. So that's going to be the April 22nd, 2020. Let's, I'm just going to pull these all across again, because as I said before, we're just looking at date formatting on this stuff anyway. Start end. So here's going to be our date. So for anybody who hasn't worked with React before or React Native, it looks pretty much the same as HTML, except you've got the capitalized component class names essentially instead of what your normal HTML elements would be. Generally speaking, the docs for React Native are quite good. So if you're looking into digging into this yourself, I'd just spend some time and actually go through them because, again, it's a good resource. For anybody who does spend some time with it in the future, feel free to ping us on some future meetup and just ask questions, because like I've been working in React Native for about 2.5 years now, I think, and it's been a good experience. Sometimes I miss the native side of things too, but it's nice having that cross-platform capability, and more people have access to JavaScript than they do Swift experience or Objective-C experience or Java experience in a lot of cases too. So one of the other things that you got to watch is sometimes if you've got a screen or a string that's broken up this way, it will actually create it as multiple children. I think this is going to be one child, this is going to be another child, and this is going to be a third child, which I believe this is what this is complaining about. So what I'm going to do here, just on a hunch, is pull that in like that. Okay, so we're going to rerun this test. No, 7 till 8. Okay, I see my problem. Test is right and the implementation is wrong, or vice versa. Test is wrong. Okay. And this is one last thing that I'm just going to avoid this issue altogether, just because in the interest of time, we're going to do an event.description. And I'm just going to override this and do a lorem ipsum. think what's happening here is there's a difference between how React Native testing library and how React Native does the line breaks on things. So I've seen this before where you've actually got to clear out the line breaks in the one case versus the other before the test suite runs out. I don't know if that's a bug on one side of things or the other. I'm not really sure, but this should get around it, I think. Yeah, I saw the comment on there about putting the template string in. I think it's just strictly this value was too long and the line breaks is the difference for it. But that did fix it for now. I'm not too concerned about that, but maybe we can follow up on it later. Okay, so we're running that test. We are good on it. And then what I'd like to do is I'm going to hard code this event into a screen so that we can actually see what this thing's going to look like, and then we can style it out. So let's switch out to the screen. And what I want to do is I want to follow this same container versus screen pattern. The responsibility of the container is always going to be hitting the API and then coming back with the result and then passing it into the screen. So this screen shouldn't be responsible for any loading activity. It should just be taking the prop and rendering it out. So if we look at the event container, it's not currently doing anything. Container, we're going to bring in React the same way. See why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it once we get into the navigation, because we are actually going to need to pass in a channel ID based on how we navigated to the screen to figure out which channel we're going to load. So I'm just going to hard code something in for now, and then we'll tackle the API integration later on. So this is going to be hard coded, and it's going to come from the fixture. Okay, so we're going to bring this in the same way as we did with the tests for now. This event is going to be fixture.0. Now we know we've got nothing to really do in here. So what I'm going to do is switch over to our app.tsx. This is the file that you're using for actually launching up the app and saying where the root view is going to be. When we get into the React navigation stuff later on, we're going to do a bunch of edits to this file. But for now, I'm just going to swap out events for event. And that's going to come from this instead. So this is the container that we just created. And if you look at the path through this, basically application launches, it loads up this app component. The app component builds up a safe area view, which is just making sure that there's spacing for status bars and things like that. And then it loads up this event container. If you dig into the event container, that's going to be pulling in the fixture for now until we actually do the API integration. And then it's passing that event down into the screen. And if you look at the screen is taking in the event through the props here. It's doing a bunch of formatting, and then it's just going to lay everything out. So that's essentially the path all the way through for how the view is going to be rendered. And if we go back in here, there's our completely unstyled view right now. Everyone got a good look? All right. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in a scroll view because some of these descriptions get longer. Fairly simple change. I'm going to keep the view in here because we are going to need it for something in a second. What we're going to do is bring in a view here. That's going to be used for giving our padding around the screen. Same as what we were doing for the styling before. I'm going to give a style here, and that's going to be styles.container. And then we're going to bring in the styles up here. So this is going to be on styles. Style sheet type create. Again, this is basically just the same way you normally do styles, except it's like applying inline styles. And we're going to do a container. This is going to take a padding of 20, I think. Yeah, so now we've got the padding around the view. The next thing that I'd like to do is going to be, we're going to take a grouping here of the date, time, and attendees and give like a little metadata block on things. So what I'm going to do here is we'll bring in a view. Bring this up in. And I'm going to do a spacing style here, which is just going to be like a generic utility. And we'll put it right here. Good. Okay, so we got a little bit of a line break in here. We'll do a little more styling so that stands out. But I'm going to take that spacing style that's here. I'm also going to apply it on this section, I think. So that's giving us a little more padding underneath. And then I'm gonna do a little bit of text styling on this too. So we're gonna say name text. So I'm gonna bring in a font size here. So let's apply our name text here. A little big, maybe. Don't worry, I will actually stop on the screen when there's something worth seeing. Okay, so this is our general view. It's inside of a scroll view, so if we do scroll down, we will see something. We're also going to want to make sure that there's enough height to that, but we'll come back to that later maybe. So the other thing that I'd like to do here is take this entire chunk of text, and I want to give it like a muted metadata style grayed out text. So I'm going to give this here maybe a metadata text, a color of 888 maybe. Yeah, there we go. So I'm not going to worry about anything else sizing wise here. Again, we can circle back to this if we want to do some more styling at the end, but this gives us at least a rough view that we can work with. Next thing I'd like to do after creating that event screen is let's get into the service that we're using for connecting to the API before. And we're going to do a show like single event type of method for things, and we will drive that out with tests. But before I do that, I'm going to do a quick commit. I'm going to leave the app.tsx out because we're just playing around with that right now. Anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay. Next thing is the services. So this is the service that we built up last month for listing out our events. Currently, this is a full listing that comes in through here. And what we want to do is add a single event. So we're going to do a test for single event. This is going to be an event's ID, I think, which we don't have yet. That's all right. This is going to be a get. And the meetup API actually takes in strings as the type for the ID. So I'm just going to give it like a 1, 2, 3 in here. And I'm going to keep this test fairly short. So I think we're just going to say response.name. And that's going to equal, it's going to be fixtures dot events ID. And then dot name, I think, is how this is going to come in. So the next thing we want to do here is we're going to create an events ID fixture. It's going to be that. Don't have that yet. Okay, so next thing we want to do is actually create the fixture. We bring in Postman. All right, so let's hit this endpoint. This is the node or the Nest.js server that I created, and that repo is also linked up on the one that I'll share later. So this is our individual endpoint. What I'm going to do is take that entire fixture. Shouldn't need that anymore. And then I'm going to do an events ID JSON, post that in, and that's going to give us our fixture that we can work against. So I think if we click on this now, yeah, that is taking us straight to name. So if you look at this fixtures event ID is going to what we just captured in Postman. This service call is going to be essentially using that fixture on the back end, but we're just mocking it out through this mock fetch call. And then we're expecting that the response.name is going to equal the event's name so that we know things are actually all wired up. All right, so if we look at our implementation here, we're going to have this get method. We're going to have an ID that's passed into it. And then we want to make a fetch against this host, which is configured on our services file /events/ID. We're capturing that. Our JSON is just being dumped out. And I think that's actually all we need. Yeah, okay. So this test is actually passing now. Yeah, that's our service update. There's not a whole lot to it. But yeah, in the project, for anybody who wasn't around last month, this is something that we've been doing on our team lately. So any of the API connection, we're handling the API integration as well as the transformation of the model and everything inside these services folder. So then if somebody switched from React Native to regular React or any other framework, really, we're just talking about vanilla JavaScript. So there's our commit there. Okay, so our next step, and this is probably one of the bigger things that we're going to do tonight. So I think we're pretty good on time right now, but what we need to do is install React navigation for our actual routing across the application. So what I'm going to do is switch back in here, and I am going to pull in the getting started information so you can see where I'm getting this stuff from. But React navigation is actually something that's included with Expo, so it's one of the more widely used ones. And what we want to do is we're going to do a yarn add React navigation React navigation native, and I have my terminal running here. I'm going to bring it up into the view. So this is just going to be yarn add. I'm going to take this from the instructions, but I'm also going to do the React navigation stack because that's something that I ran into on the prep for this. It's needed. Okay, so that's installed now. The next step is going to be this, I believe. And I think we can just take that as is. Good. So I think we're actually done with this documentation for now, but that can be linked in as well. I'll drop it in out of the slide notes or somewhere in the comment thread on the meetup. Our bundler runs in the background, and I generally like to stop it after doing an install on something. Okay, so here's our bundler window. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually do a little bit of the setup on the app.tsx file, and then we'll figure out how we're actually going to route this thing together. So if we go into app.tsx, and I will have to consult my notes a little bit on this because there's a little more to this than normal, and we don't actually have to do it a whole lot. So there's a navigation container coming from React Navigation. This is going to be bringing the navigation container on this thing. And then I believe we need a stack, and this is going to be a create stack navigator. So with React navigation, this is going to be the essentially the same setup every single time. So once you've done it once or twice, you don't need to worry about it on a project. But what we're going to do here is so this name is going to be events. And that's going to handle the title that we were talking about way back when. Then here's our component. And this is going to be events is the first one. And then the second is going to be like the event info. This for now. So what you need here is a stack navigator. I believe that's the issue. Yep, there you go. So fairly subtle change, but you can actually see the navigation title on the top here now. And this doesn't actually take you anywhere. If we click on things, it won't take us to the detail screen yet, but we will do that next. So what I'm going to do is switch straight into that. Might do, I'm going to do a commit here actually right now. So again, if you ever dig into React navigation, just keep the reference handy because there is a little bit to this setup. Okay, so next step is going to be the individual screens. We need to be able to pass from the one screen to the other. So what I'm going to do here is let's define an onSelect event. That's going to be, or handler rather. So that's going to be a function that takes an event. And it's going to be some navigation that this takes. I'm not going to worry about the typing for this. I'm just going to do a props any for now. But really what we want to do here is it's going to be a props.navigate. This is how you interface with the navigation stack. And then what we're going to pass that is just the event. So that's going to be the name that we've defined on that app.tsx. So this has to line up with whatever you've got here or here. depending on which screen you want to go to. So we're going to take that navigation here. And what I want to do here is take this, the screen props, and we want to support a new prop. That's going to be the onSelect. I'm going to take an event, and it's going to return void. That type needs to be supported. And then the next thing that we need to do is we want to run this in a touchable. One minor tidbit is if anybody's ever working with React Native and you want to run a touchable opacity, you need to have a view between the touchable opacity and any custom component you have. Either that or you need to do something that I don't normally do on my component because the touchable actually does decorate a couple things. So I'm going to specify this without feedback. It's going to be on press. Select. So this, currently the problem with this is we don't actually pass an event into it. One of the things that we don't want to capture is this item that's being passed in here is an event. So we want to close around that. So what I'm going to do is a const onSelect here. This onPress doesn't actually take an argument, or the argument has to be an event depending on how you want to handle that. But we're going to take that. We're going to do an onSelect. And then this item is in scope at this point. So we're going to capture the item here. And then this is actually just going to be an onSelect. I think that's all it was complaining about before. So if you look at the flow through this now this is complaining about not having an onSelect, which is a very valid complaint. So we're going to pass in an onSelect. That's going to be our onSelect, which again is taken down to the screen. The screen is the one that's going to grab this item from the render item, and then it's going to send it back through this prop so that we've got an event hooked in here. So we're not currently using this, but we will use it very, very soon. So what I'm going to do is switch back. So now the moment of truth is if we click on this, it should take us to our hard-coded event details screen, and it does, which is great. Okay, so container is doing a navigation to the event, but it's just doing it to a hard-coded event. So the next thing we want to do is actually pass through a couple parameters to this. So this is just going to be an event ID. That's going to be event ID that's coming from the argument here. And then the way we actually use that is go to our event. We can look at this and it's going to be the same type of deal. Any one of these days I will figure out what the type actually needs to be for this, but for now, this is going to be props, route, params, and then this is going to be event ID. So then I'm just going to log this out for now so that we know that we're working with the right thing. There we go. So you can see that. Maybe you can see that coming up in the terminal at the bottom. So we do have the correct event ID on this thing. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to take this container, this event that we're loading up that is coming from a fixture. Let's get rid of that and let's make it dynamic. And the way we need to do that is there's two hooks, React hooks that we need to use. One is going to be the use effect so that we can do it on mount of the component. And then the other one is going to be the use state so that we can load up the state on this thing. So let's go here. We're going to do a const event, set event, state. That is going to be one of two types, which will be event or undefined. State. We're not currently doing anything with it. That's okay. And like I said before, we're not actually doing any testing on these containers. I'd love to backfill that with some end-to-end tests, but right now we're just trying to limit our exposure as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is, if there's no event, we want to return out a null so that there's nothing on the screen. Theoretically, we want to do a loading indicator or something here, but for now, we're just going to try not to die basically on it. And then we're going to go up here, and the use effect is the other one that I was talking about. I think we actually used this last time to do the loading of the events, but use effect is from the React hooks that are available. And it's basically a lifecycle callback. So when the component is mounted or when a prop changes on things, this is going to get triggered. So if we wanted to change based on like the event ID or something like that, we can pass it in here. And then basically just anytime that prop changes, it will refire this event. But for now, we're going to keep it on mount. And we're going to do a service. It's going to be the new service. It should come in from our events. Good. This fixture we don't need anymore. And then this is going to be, you can't do a async call in here. So you actually need to wrap it up and then make a call against it. So we're going to do wait this service get. This is going to be the event ID. And then we're going to need to set the event when we're done this. The last step on this is going to be a load call. Okay, so everybody's happy now. I'm going to pull this down in here too. Okay, so now if we look at this, there we go. We got Tailwind CSS for JavaScript developers. Got Learn About Livewire. All these are scrollable. This is, to the first question, it's probably a simplified answer for things, but you can see we are using a view with the native scroll bar on the top, on the side of things. Yeah, maybe we can sideline that discussion if anybody has any questions about providing different implementations depending on platform, whether it's Mac or PC or Android or iOS or anything along those lines, because it is possible with the platform. The other thing that you can actually do here is this call could die for other reasons if the service isn't available or something along those lines. So what you could do is you could provide an error state at the top here and then render out the error state when there's an error state present. And then this whole thing would just get wrapped up in a try-catch block. I'm not, I'll maybe do the try-catch block and not worry about the error state right now, but it doesn't tell the user anything. So ideally you want to do more than this, but at least for now, it's just going to log out the issue. Yeah, if we jump back here. Yep. As far as I can tell, we're functional at this point.